Okay, Allison, you've shown us a lot of exercises here. Now, pitchers need to focus on different areas than other athletes, but some of these exercises were similar to other programs that you might see. How much differently do pitchers need to train from their teammates?
Generally, all softball athletes, you want to be strong. So very many of the exercises are similar just for general strengthening. But as we progress further into the individual positions, the pitchers are going to rely heavily on muscular endurance in the rotators and explosive leg and hip power. So for your pitching athletes, I would concentrate more on the power lifts that we showed for explosive hip power, a lot of light, heavy repetitions on the rotators, and a lot of wrist flexibility and strengthening.
Okay, you say light weights, but a lot of repetitions on the rotators.
So that they can build muscular endurance in that area without fatiguing the muscle.
Okay, now, how often should I do this? How many times a week do I need to do this?
3 times a week is plenty. You don't want to overwork the athlete, and 3 seems to be the best amount that you can go with the athlete.
Okay, now say I'm in my season and it's the day before a game. Do I do these exercises? Do I do all of them? Do I do none of them?
I would recommend to give the athlete at least 2 days rest before beginning, a pitcher, because you, as I said, you don't want to overtrain or overwork the shoulder area.
Could I, if I'm going to give them rest in the shoulder area, could I do some exercises for the lower body?
Sure, I would say a light intensity day would be good.
Okay, for the lower body.
For the lower body, sure.
Okay, now, if, for example, when do I start this kind of a program? It's prior to my season, maybe it's in the off season even. When's the best time to really start this kind of a program?
Well, for pitchers, I'd recommend in the off season to get them on a lot of long distance running, 30, 40 minutes of light jogging, so that they build muscular endurance in their body. They can start light lifting, maybe 12 to 15 repetitions of light weights 3 times a week. And then as school starts, they can drop down to 10 repetitions, 3 sets of 10 repetitions 3 times a week, and start getting into the middle distance running, maybe stadium steps, doing 800s and 600s, things like that. Then as you progress toward the competitive season, I would drop those repetitions to 8 to 10, increase the weight a little bit, and you're still working out 3 times a week. Once season begins, it's not necessary to train more than twice a week because you have so many games and so many practices that the athlete's getting plenty of work.
Okay, now, as I mentioned before, you gave us about 20 or 30 exercises on this tape that we could do. Do we need to do all these exercises every time we work out?
Oh no, you want to keep your exercise program about an hour and 15 minutes long, and you can do 10 to 12 exercises each workout. So Monday might be a little different than Wednesday, which might be a little different than Friday, and that's a great way to train because they don't get bored, they don't get stale. That variety will keep stimulating their body in different ways.
So completely different exercises on different days.
They don't have to be completely different, but I think it's a good idea to change 1 or 2 of, especially of the large muscles. Like one day you might do a power clean, and one day you might do a squat or a leg press, something like that, or a lunge, so that the body's getting stimulated at different angles and different ranges of motion.
You made a good point. You mentioned endurance. I think from a pitching standpoint, quite often when a pitcher is experiencing control problems, that they very often, we start to mess around with their mechanics and we start to make a lot of big changes with them. Could it not be that as she gets into the later stages of the game, that control problems might be an offset of poor conditioning?
It could be. It could be a combination of poor conditioning, low strength levels, low endurance levels, and it could be, of course, some of their mental toughness or mental ability.
Okay. Now, one last thing I want to make mention of, and that is that in the pitching motion, you see that the athlete through the pitching motion gets into some positions through the motion that you wouldn't want a normal person to get into those positions.
Right.
In fact, a lot of times we tell people don't arch your back. But if you go through the pitch properly and I bring my hips forward, you're telling me, and I tell my athletes bring their hips forward. I tell pitchers you want to get your hips forward. That means I'm arching my back. How important is that back strength?
I think that's a really good point because so many people are afraid to strength train or lift weights with their low back, their erector muscles. And the erector muscle is such a stabilizer, and it provides a lot of structural integrity to the trunk. So if you have really strong abs and a weak back, you're looking at possible muscle pulls or injury. If you have a strong back and weak abs, you're looking at muscle injury. So I would say the trunk, and I believe we showed this in the exercises, we concentrated heavily on the trunk and low back exercises for pitchers.
Well, Allison, I want to say thank you, and you really brought a lot of value to the pitching program, and I think that the importance of the strength coach has really been brought out in the exercises that you've shown us.
Thank you, Kathy.